Welcome to the Well Seasoned Librarian Podcast. This is Season 6, Episode 17, and I'm your host, Dean Jones. Today I'm speaking with Thomas Steinwinder of Longleaf Tea Company in Laurel, Mississippi. We were able to talk about the company and what goes into growing tea, and I really enjoyed my conversation with Thomas. I had seen him and his wife Hillary on the TV show Hometown, the TV show where Ben and Erin Napier go on and do renovations of someone's home. In this episode, of course, though, they did a little different task and they renovated the people's business. And it was pretty awesome because I really got to see some of the creative flair that the Napiers had, and they just did some amazing stuff for their business. It was also really neat to get to see kind of some visual images of tea growing and what it takes to grow tea, and that was really fun for me too. I really enjoyed the episode, and I recommend it to you highly. If anything, it made me really curious about tea in general and the business of growing tea and how it's grown. So I got to talk to Thomas and nerd out a little bit agriculturally. Thomas was a fun person to talk to, and I hope that I get to meet him again one day when my wife and I visit Laurel, Mississippi, inevitably. We both love the town from the TV show Hometown, and we just really are gaga about it and want to visit it one day. That being said, I'm going to go ahead and go right to my conversation with Thomas Steinwinder, a Longleaf Tea Company. Here we go. Welcome to the Well Seasoned Librarian Podcast. I'm the host, Dean Jones, and today I'm talking with business owner Thomas Steinwinder of the Longleaf Tea Company in Mississippi. Thomas, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks, Dean. Appreciate you having me.
So Thomas, can we start off by telling our listeners who are not familiar with you, your company, a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm originally from South Mississippi, from a town on the coast called Gulfport, and moved to Laurel, Mississippi, which is a bit north of there. And then went off to school and worked as an environmental engineer away for almost 20 years. My wife and I lived in Nashville, lived in Houston, and then lived off and on abroad for a number of years. And returned back to Mississippi 3 years ago. And now we still an environmental engineer, but also have multiple kids and thousands of tea plants with this new project.
So Thomas, with your wife, Hillary, you launched Longleaf Tea Company in 2018. In my research, I read that this formation came after an interesting conversation in Shanghai in 2011. Can we talk about that conversation and how it led to today's tea company?
Yeah, it was fun. So I was based in Shanghai, working on projects for the engineering firm that I work for, and it was really important to be able to communicate in Mandarin. And so I was taking night classes 5 days a week in Mandarin language. And then in between conference calls or meetings, I would go down to a tea shop below my apartment and just speak with the lady that owned the tea shop and ran the tea shop, just to practice Mandarin, and also in that conversation learn and discuss and taste really good tea. And she would always talk about how tea in China is associated with the geography. You never just say it's a Longjing or it's a Pu'er. You always say the type and then also where it's from. It's very important. And she asked, where are the tea areas in the U.S.? Where do you all grow your tea and produce the best teas? And I said, I really didn't have a good answer for that, Dean. I said, I have no idea. And it just got me thinking that we really drink so much tea in the U.S., but we don't necessarily grow and produce it. And that conversation is really what jump-started the deep dive and the interest and the research into this project.
So speaking of that research, you did 7 years of research before you started planting. So you didn't just jump into this. You really kind of did as much investigative work as you could. Can we talk about that research and what it was like for you?
Yeah, I would say that there's really two parts to it. There was the market research, which was digging into the supply demand, where all the tea comes from right now, realizing that the majority of it's imported to the U.S., understanding the price for retail tea, for high-end tea versus commodity tea, just understanding the market side of it. And then there's a whole different line of research that was understanding the the subject matter of tea. So where does it grow best? What type of conditions does it like? What are the yields? Where should we focus on trialing the tea? How do you make tea from a tea leaf, from a raw leaf? How do you make a black tea, a green tea, a white tea? So that all of that, like you just mentioned, took many, many years. And we even did some trial and error. Like we would buy seeds and try those in our backyard or in the garden, and we failed over and over again. But it was certainly a a labor of love and a long-term research project.
Now, I drink a lot of tea year round. I probably drink, I mean, I'm probably exaggerating, but I probably drink like a gallon of iced tea a day. And I think
Nice.
a lot of people do. But I never really thought about what tea is or where it's from or how it's grown. What exactly
Right.
is tea? What I mean, what I know it sounds like a dumb question, but like, could you explain to us what tea is? Like the what our popular conception of it is?
Yeah. You know, let's start with the plant. So it's a camellia plant, and a lot of us have camellias in our yards, especially down here in the South. Everybody loves having camellias. And so tea comes from the Camellia sinensis, which just means Chinese camellia. And what happens is the new growth on that camellia plant is plucked or cut or harvested in some way, and then it's processed to make the tea that we're all used to. Now, all of the different teas that we drink come from the same plant. There's not a white tea plant and a green tea plant and a black tea plant. It's just one type of tea plant, and then how you process it determines if it's a black tea or a green tea or a white tea or a yellow or a oolong. What we're used to in the U.S. is black tea, and typically it's the standard, oxidized, and then often it's cut in order to fit into tea bags, but that's what we're used to.
Now, I live in an agricultural area, and I've grown up in agriculture areas that produced wheat, potatoes, sunflowers, and right now I live in areas that are specific to almonds,
Mhm.
very, very specifically. And I see the different ways they grow almonds, and I think a lot of people will be surprised because like there's machines that go in and shake the trees at harvest time. What is the special kind of considerations you have to do for tea when you grow it?
Yeah. Well, there's the first. Let's start with just the soil and the climate that's
Yeah.
required. I mean, it needs an acidic soil. It needs well draining soil. It doesn't like to have wet feet. And then probably about an inch a week of water is about right. And then, just good, strong sun throughout the year. I mean, down here, our growing season is from early April to early November. So a very long growing season. And so it just loves the sun like all camellias do. So, once we check that box and get the growing conditions right, then we think about how we want to plant. And there's a number of different ways. It's typically planted in a row, and there's single row or double row. We planted in the double row, and those two rows are planted side by side, and they will end up growing and hedging together to make one big, almost like a box hedge, the tea plants will. And so once we get to that point, then we start thinking about where we want to set the table. And that's the top of the tea plant, how you want to table it and at what height so that you can harvest. And so if you can imagine, if the plants are really, really low, like at knee level, you have to bend over when you're plucking tea leaves. And that's difficult. Also, if it's at chin level or higher, I mean, these plants will grow to become trees. That becomes difficult for harvest as well. So we try to keep it, around belly button height, between chest and waist. For good harvesting. And so that's the last part of the key design parameters.
Now, do you grow a specific type of tea? Like, are you growing black tea, green tea, or white tea?
Yeah. Well, all those teas come from the same plant.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just all depends on how you process it. But what we're doing is we're trialing different varieties or cultivars, as they call it, because there's no playbook in the US for which cultivars work great. And so we have one from Australia, we have one from India, we have a cultivar from the country of Georgia, bringing in one from Taiwan. We're trying all these different cultivars and varieties to see what's going to thrive and produce the best yield down in South Mississippi. So to answer your question, there's a number of different varieties that we're trialing.
Now, your your company is Longleaf Tea Company. And I think I saw that it was mentioned that it's because it refers to the pine needles in the soil. Is that correct?
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So this part of Mississippi was originally being covered in massive old growth longleaf pine trees, just massive trees. And so this was kind of the heart of the Southern timber industry, starting in Reconstruction in the 1880s after the Civil War. And the land that we farm has been a timber plot from the beginning. The old growth longleaf pines were cut, and then it was replanted a number of times. And so, yeah, the name of the company is just paying appreciation to the history of the land that was originally longleaf pine.
This episode is sponsored by Culinary Historians of Northern California, a Bay Area educational group dedicated to the study of food, drink, and culture in human history. To learn more about this organization and their work, please visit their website at www.chnorcal.org. Now you grow and you craft your tea and then you sell it. So it basically goes from farm to teapot. So was that kind of a learning curve for you as far as creating that process, or have you had, you seem to have had great success with it. What has that been like for you?
It was definitely a learning process. I mean, that may even be an understatement. I mean, it started with reading all the books that I could find in English on processing. And then everybody that was doing it in the US, which is a very small list, very short number of folks, reaching out to them. Right now, the tea industry in the US is so small that we all know each other and we share information openly and help each other out, which is just great. But there's another grower and producer, a couple more in Mississippi. And one in particular, the Great Mississippi Tea Company in Brookhaven. I would travel over there and I would make tea with them, and they would teach me what they've learned and their best practices. And then I would come back to Laurel and I would try it out and see if I could replicate it. Then I would make my own adjustments to it. And so it was a lot of trial and error. All of 2020, Dean, was spent practicing and making batch after batch after batch until we got it right. So we spent a whole year, just trialing batches.
That sounds amazing. What has been some of the response from the fans of your tea? Have you gotten a lot of feedback from people that are purchasing it online?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the fun part for us is, especially when it's someone that has only had, kind of like you were mentioning earlier, only had iced tea their entire life from a bag that they bought from the grocery store. And then they try a specialty tea for the first time, whether it's our green or black or our white tea. And just getting the response, many people just had no idea that tea could taste that way or taste that different and have that many different aspects of it. So that's always really fun. We also just love getting the feedback on a lot of people love to understand the history and of how it was made, because as you said, that's not something that is common knowledge whenever we're consuming tea. And so I get a lot of questions and emails about, hey, I bought some of your green tea. Like, where did it come from? How did you make it? When did you harvest it? What was the process that you did to develop this tea, this batch? And so that's really fun. And then I think the last thing I would say is where our focus is on repeat customers. A lot of people may have heard our story and got excited about the story or saw us on GTV's Hometown and will try the tea. That's great, and we love that. But we know we're doing a good job when people come back and buy it a second time. That's when we know that we're actually making that people are excited about the product itself.
So I saw you on Hometown. I'm a big fan of the show. My wife and I want to move to Laurel, Mississippi so bad because it just looks like
Oh,
the
please
best place in the
come
world.
on.
It looks like the
We'd
best
love to
place.
have
Oh, we would love to be there. If there are any openings for librarians, we're both willing to go in a second. But yeah, I just really loved that episode. What was it like for you filming that, and what's been the experience for you after the show came out?
you. Yeah, I mean, the filming part was a blast. We had been wanting to renovate the farmhouse, and just the history on the farmhouse. I mean, it's been in my wife's family for 6 generations. So it has just a ton of history. We all have great memories going way back of that farmhouse. But it desperately needed a renovation. We've been wanting to forever, and it was just too big of a project for us to take on ourselves. So we connected with Ben and Aaron, and we wouldn't trust it with just anybody, but we definitely trusted them, and they just did a fantastic job leading it. And filming was a blast. We were friends with them prior to the show, and they're just like you see on TV, great humans with great hearts, and they love really digging into these projects. And so it was an absolute blast the whole time.
I love your design aesthetic for the place that you have, and then your website, and even just your logos and your product packaging. Was that on your mind when you created all this, like that you wanted to create a certain aesthetic? Because it's really very nice, very cool.
No, I appreciate that. Some of it has kind of happened organically, but we had really good advice in the beginning when we were kind of kicking this project off. Is that building a very strong brand identity early and a foundation to build off of. A lot of people gave us that guidance to start strong, that it's difficult to kind of revise your brand over time. And so start with a really strong branding and a really strong statement that captures your story. And so we worked with a designer named Ethan Manning, who's also worked with a lot of folks in a lot of companies that you'd be familiar with in Laurel, to develop our logo and our kind of our brand identity. And just he knocked it out of the park, and it's been just a blast building off of that ever since.
Now, do you consider yourself a tea person, and what are your favorite kind of teas?
Yeah, I do. And there has yet to be a tea that I've tried that I don't like, or a type of tea that I don't like. I love them all, and it just depends, Dean, on the day and on the weather outside. Like today, I had a white tea from Nepal after I had my morning coffee, which I know you're like, oh, morning coffee. Hold on, you're a tea guy. I'm not a tea snob, and I'm not a purist in that way, that I absolutely love coffee as well. So I'll start the morning with a cup of coffee, followed by a cup of tea. And this morning it was a white tea from Nepal. Yesterday it was I was testing some of our green tea. We finished our first 2 batches, and so I will taste those over time and see how they change and how they mature. But yeah, it's a hard question for me because I really love all types of teas.
Do you have any new products that are coming out that you want to talk about and let people know about?
I will say this: we received a lot of attention and a lot of interest after the show, and one of the things that's difficult is there's only so many plants we have in the ground,
Right.
and
so yeah.
we harvest weekly right now. So this past week we harvested twice, and we can't keep up. We sold out in 4 hours.
Oh wow. 4 hours. That's incredible.
It is. It's exciting. We love it. But we also feel kind of guilty because we know that there's a lot of people that didn't get the first batch or the second batch, and they're waiting for it. And there's only so much we can make off of the plants that we have in the ground. So we made 2 batches of green tea. Our next batch will be black. There's been a lot of folks asking for and waiting for the black tea. So we'll make a few batches of that next. We'll mix in some white tea in there as well. So we'll have the green, the black, and the white throughout the harvest season. And then to answer your question, we're always coming up with ideas on things we want to try. I'd love to do a couple trials on an oolong tea this year. And then I'd love to look at a few different variations on the green tea. Our green tea is steamed, which is like the Japanese style. But I'd also like to do a pan fried or a wok fired green tea, which is the Chinese style, and try that out this year as well.
Well, Thomas, I've really enjoyed getting a chance to talk to you, and I really hope that one day my wife and I can make a visit out to Laurel and get to stop by your farm and visit.
Oh, we would love it. We would absolutely love it. And please let us know, because we'd love to host you out here and introduce you to some fun teas. So yeah, this has been fun.
Well, it's been great talking to you. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
All right.
That was my conversation with Thomas Steinwinder of Longleaf Tea Company. You can go to the company bio on the link and purchase some tea or some of their sweet merchandise that they sell. On Friday, we're going to have Lily Ramirez-Foran, whose new book Tacos is out, and we got to talk about that a bit. She has a shop in Ireland called Picado, where she also teaches cooking classes. The new book Tacos is magnificent. You can find it online to purchase as well with the link that we have in the bio. If you follow my podcast and enjoy it, I'm on Buy Me a Coffee, where you can send me a little tip or share your thoughts. You can promote this podcast and share this episode with a friend on social media. Look for us on Twitter at Well Librarian. You can follow the Well Seasoned Librarian podcast on Spotify or iTunes or Stitcher and get notified when new episodes are released each week. You can subscribe to the podcast newsletter as well and get updates about my articles on more at wellseasonedlibrarian.substack.com. Our podcast theme song, Talk About Love, is sung by the band Kitty Cat Fan Club, which I'm a fan of, and their label Asian Man Records has given permission for its use. You can check them out and also many of their other bands on the label and get an album or t-shirt or sticker from Asian Man Records at asianmanrecords.com. Until Friday, I hope you all have a wonderful week and keep on cooking.
I've been getting